Hello guys, welcome back to another episode here on African Confessions. There is a message that I want to share with you guys, and the message, it comes from a translation of a message that I received, and this is the narration of that message. The message reads like this. Hello my brother, how are you? Can you please post my story as hidden identity? My brother, I am a woman who is aged 32 years old. I am currently working here in South Africa. So when I came here to South Africa, it was not my plan, because already back home I had my small shop, and this small shop of mine, one of my boyfriend who was a truck driver, he was the one who was funding everything for me. He used to do anything for me. So the route that he used to be traveling on, the guy, he was going to DRC. Sometimes he would get some stuff for me from Tanzania, then he would bring everything for me free of charge. I cannot say that I was suffering when I was still back home, but it happened that when I had joined Facebook, that was when I was in 2016, I was going through a heartbreak. So I then said that it is far much better that I find someone who will be willing to take care of me, not what that guy was doing, whereby he would be giving me some stuff so that I can resell that stuff. I just wanted to date someone who was already working and someone that was financially stable. So whilst I was searching for a financially stable guy on Facebook, I then met this other guy. Me and him, we started talking. This guy, he was from South Africa, and he started telling me everything about his wife, how they were having a lot of problems. I said, why don't you come here so that you can take me back to South Africa? The guy was really scared. He said, how about I send you some money? Then when I have sent you some money, then you would come and join me here in South Africa. So my brother, what happened is that when this guy sent me the money, I then went and I gave that money to my sister. And my sister, she had some rituals that she had to perform so that the guy, because he had sent me money, he can keep on sending me more money. This was my sister's plan. She is just like that. She says that no man will be willing to marry you for nothing. A man would only want to marry you because they want to use you in a certain kind of a way. So when I told her that I had met this guy who was from South Africa, who had already sent me some money so that I can go and join him there in South Africa, my sister then said that you should not believe everything that he is telling you. What you are supposed to do is that let us try to perform a ritual first, so that I know that when you are in South Africa, he won't do anything bad to you. And already since he had sent me his money, my sister said that this was going to be very easy, because the money is a part of you. So spiritually, if you have given someone your money, and if they are in possession of your money, they can do anything spiritually so as to control you. That is what my sister ended up doing. We took that money, then my sister went with the money to the river. Then she did some rituals, and the next day I then saw that the guy, the way that he was in love with me, it was just uncontrollable. I then got hold of this other guy. He was a Malaysia. So since we come from the area of Rutenga, we always have connection with taxi drivers as well as truck drivers, those ones that are smuggling people into South Africa and out of South Africa. He then charged me the money that I was supposed to pay so that I can be smuggled into South Africa. That guy, I told him that the money that he had sent me, it was not enough. He then said that since this guy was going to smuggle me into South Africa, he was a Malaysia, maybe if I would ask him, he might have a bank account. So I then asked that guy, and he said that indeed he has a South African bank account. So that guy, he just deposited the money into the bank account. What was happening now, it was that the spirit, that river spirit, was the one that was controlling the whole process. So anything that I would ask from him, he would just do it without me even requesting for more things. He kept on asking me if I wanted more money, but the money that he had sent me, it was already be enough. And to be honest with you, at that time, my brother, I was also beginning to fall in love with this guy. You know, when you start chopping up a guy's money, you start to feel sorry for him. Even though my sister, she was saying that do not feel sorry for him, he should send us more money, maybe we can even use that money to do something. But I was in love with this guy because I could see that he had faced so many heartbreaks in his life, and I was willing to become that woman who was going to take care of his broken heart. But already we had started our relationship on a wrong foot because I was performing a lot of charms on him, even though he was not knowing that I was performing all of those charms on him. So when the Malaysia came and picked me up at Rutenga, we then started driving towards South Africa. But along the way, my brother, there was one thing that happened, because whilst we were on that Malaysia's taxi, the guy that was sitting next to me, he was really talkative, and from the way that he was talking, I saw that this guy there in South Africa, he was living a very comfortable life. He said that he was once married to a South African, so most of his assets, they were in the name of his South African wife. That is why he could not bring his car to him, but he started showing us all of his assets that he owned there in South Africa. And I really got inspired by him, and I kept on looking at him. He then caught me looking at him. That was when he realized that I had developed some feelings for him, since he was telling us of his great wealth that he had there in South Africa. He then said that if you want, I can go with you to Joburg, where I am staying, because I have decided that me and my wife, we are supposed to get a divorce, and I want to get married to a Zimbabwean wife, so that if we have any kids, I'll know that I'll be able to bring my kids to Zim, so that I can introduce them to the ancestors. And this was good for me. I then said that there was another guy whom I had met on Facebook, but I didn't tell him that the guy, he was a South African. I just said that I was dating this guy. So I don't know that if I go with you, what am I supposed to tell that guy? He then said that it is far much better that you just lie to him and you tell him that we have been caught by the police and we are stuck by the side of the road. For 4 days, this guy, I had already told him that he was supposed to come and pick me up in Musina. So this guy, since he had heard that I was traveling on my way coming to South Africa, he said that he could not hold his feelings anymore. And mind you, these were not his feelings that were working, but he was being controlled by that river spirit. That is why he drove all the way from his place, coming to book a room there in Musina so that he can just wait for me. He said, I can't wait to meet you, my love. When I told him that we had been caught by the police on the Zim side and we were still stuck by the side of the road, you could tell from his voice that this guy, he was really sad and he was really stressed, because he was supposed to return back to work. He could not afford not to return back to work in time. But I kept on telling him that I will come and I will come, but it was just a lie. I was just giving him empty promises. So what happened, my brother, the man that I was with on that taxi, he kept on telling me to ask for more money from that guy, and maybe I am someone who is easily controlled by other people, because just like my sister was controlling me previously, and now this guy that I had just randomly met, he was now controlling me, telling me what to do with my boyfriend. Finally, we then arrived in South Africa and we went to that place where the guy was staying. He was staying there in Joburg. When we got to Joburg, my brother, I was really confused, because this guy, I expected him to be very rich. Even though this was like my first time to be in South Africa, I expected this guy to be staying in a good place, like in a suburb. But when I saw that the taxi, the direction in which it was headed to, I immediately knew that this guy was not loaded with money. We then arrived in the location where this guy was staying. I then saw that this guy, he was just staying in a shack. And my brother, there is nothing wrong about staying in a shack, but this guy, the shack in which he was staying in, it didn't have any property at all. You know what he had for a stove. You know those hot plates. That is the type of a stove that he had. And he had removed the whole body of that stove, and he had just connected live wires to that hot plate, and he had placed it on top of 2 bricks. That was his stove. My brother, when I saw that, I had made a very big mistake, and I had not told my sister that this is what I had decided. I reported back the situation to my sister. So me reporting back to my sister, it was because I wanted her to do something about this situation in which I was finding myself in. So my sister, she is sometimes possessed by a marine spirit, and I wanted to fix this whole mess that I had found myself into, because now I wanted to go back to that South African boyfriend of mine, but I was ashamed of all the things that I had done, because that guy, he had sent me some pictures before I had blocked him. He said that he had been involved in an accident after he had returned back to work. When he saw that I was no longer when he saw that I could no longer when he saw that he could no longer communicate with me, and when he was thinking of all the money that he had spent on me, he said that when he returned back to work, he then had an accident. It was because he was not concentrating whilst he was driving, because of what had happened to me and him, because I was no longer accepting his messages. When his messages would get into my phone, I'll just ignore his messages. Even at the time when he was busy calling me, I would not even pick up his calls anymore. So he said that this was just too much stress for him, my brother. But at that time, I didn't care. But when I arrived there in Joburg, that was when I started caring about that South African guy that I had just dumped and left there in Musina, because I saw that the guy that I was now staying with, he had lied to me. He had told me that he was very rich, yet he was not even rich at all. So this sister of mine, she told me that I should not worry, people make mistakes, and she was going to look for a solution. So in our family, we are people who has always worship marine spirits. It was said that our grandfather, in the time of liberation struggle, he had traveled to Zambia so that he can join the liberation army. He wanted to become a guerrilla fighter. But when he was deployed back into the field, he then became what they used to call in the times of war a dissident. He pretended as if he was still one of the comrades, but he was working with the white Rhodesians, and he would give them the exact locations of where his other comrades were hiding in the forest or in the mountains. One night when he was operating, this was just before sunset, he was helping the white Rhodesian soldiers track down some gorillas. That was when one woman war collaborator recognized his face, and him and the other white soldiers saw that this woman had recognized her. So those white soldiers took that woman who was a war collaborator, and they murdered that woman, and they left him with the task of disposing of her body in a river. And that was what my father and the other dissident did. They lifted up that body, then they went with that woman's body into that river. So it happened that at the place where he was working as a guerrilla fighter, a lot of stuff were going on. This was before the independence. There were a lot of mountains that were forbidden, and in that village where they were, they used to perform that rain-making ceremony. So there was a river which was really sacred, and that is where the local villagers would go to perform their rituals. Then after the war, when my grandfather had already forgotten everything that had happened when he was in that liberation movement, then the spirit of that woman started to fight against my grandfather. It didn't fight against my grandfather only, but it started to fight as well against his family members, his brothers and his sisters. So he was then advised by this other traditional healer that he had visited that something was supposed to be done about this spirit of the woman, of that same woman who had been killed by those white Rhodesian soldiers, because by him picking up the body and going to dump it in the river, then it meant that he was also as guilty as charged. So when my grandfather told the rest of the when my grandfather told the rest of his relatives, that was when they said that they had to perform this ritual since he was still alive. But then they prolonged this process until my grandfather became so sick, and then he was hit by a spirit, and he then went blind and he could no longer speak. So the whole ceremony was performed when my grandfather was blind and he could not even talk. So whenever the traditional healer would ask him anything, my grandfather could not say yes or no. He was just participating, but he could not participate in the ceremony. My grandfather's relatives were the one who forced him to accept those terms and conditions. And when they went to the river with that traditional healer, they had some traditional food which they left by the side of the river. All of the traditional food that they had cooked whilst they were cooking using those traditional pots, and they served that traditional food with those traditional plates, and they left a cow. This cow that they left at the river, it didn't have any black color on its body, and they left that cow. And when they went there the next morning, they saw that the cow, it had gone missing. It was no longer there, even though they had left it tied right next to this other tree that was close to the river. After that, they saw that the cow, it had been eaten by something, and this thing that had eaten that cow, it had not chewed the bones or anything. It only took the tender meat, and at the place where they had left that cow by the tree, and at that same place where they had left that cow by the tree, which was close to that river, that is where they found the bones. They were piled up in one big pile. But they said that when they looked around to see the evidence, if this cow had been eaten up by an animal, they saw that there were no animal footprints, as well as there was no blood. It seemed as if whatever creature had eaten that cow that they had left the previous night, the creature was like it had just vacuumed the tender meat out of that cow that they had left by that river. That same day, when they returned back to that river at night, that is when a whirlwind rose up out of the river. As that whirlwind was rising up out of that river, that was when they had a river spirit that was talking to them. This river spirit, they could not see it. They only saw a whirlwind that was moving on top of the water. This whirlwind then said that it was the one who had made my grandfather to go blind, and it was the one which made my grandfather to not be able to speak, for it was holding my grandfather's mouth because of the evil deeds that he did during the times of war. The river spirit then said that in each generation until eternity, in our family there should be a child that should be chosen, and she should be named after our auntie, the one who was the eldest in my father's family. So in this generation, my sister was then chosen to be named after our auntie, and she is the one who is often possessed by the river spirits. So this sister of mine, my brother, that I was talking about, when we were still young, before we had started dating boys, what she used to do is that we would go to this other river that is called Runde, because that is the closest river that is to us, that is the closest river to our village. And then our sister will say that if you buy me something, I am willing to go underneath the water. Usually she would say, if you buy me some sweets, I can even go underneath the water for you for 30 minutes or even more. So each and every time that we would have gone to the river so that the cattle that we will be heading can drink some water, then we would give my sister, it would be me, my friends, and my sister's friends. We would give my sister some sweets so that she can go underneath the water. And my brother, she used to go underneath the water for more than an hour. But when she started sleeping around with boys, that was when she lost that power to go underneath the water and to survive for more than an hour. So at that time, when I was stuck with that poor guy that had lied to me in Joburg, I then contacted my sister because I wanted her to perform a ritual for me.